Let's look at the latest data and median accuracies regarding white-collar or blue-collar jobs. In a recent article or a recent blog post, Paul Krugman was talking about how there's less and less of a demand the pay for white-collar has slowly but surely been decreasing. And one of the things I want to show you is he wrote an article called White Collars Turn Blue, I believe in 2000, and it was looking into 100 years in the future. Well, when we look at the median earnings of men with bachelor's degree or more, you can see there's a very uncomfortable trend happening. First, you see that the information age, you had an explosion in wages, right, from 74,000 to 82,000. Now, to be fair here, you might say that this was not a sustainable explosion, right? I mean, we could make that argument and maybe say wages should be actually about right here based on the trend. But you notice that the trend has been reversing. And here we are in 2015, and there's a huge demand for blue-collar jobs. So I'm going to highlight this, and I'm going to link this in the description, this White Collars Turn Blue that he wrote, because it's very well thought out. And some of these observations have kind of already come true. For instance, among millennials, we're seeing more and more millennials move to the big city, move inside of the big city, not the suburbs, because of the price of gas, which he talks about in terms of raw materials. There are going to be changes that happen. These are not bad things. They're just, it's going to be different in things that we used to think were guaranteed or set, such as education, are not necessarily going to be set in the way that we thought. So just a couple of highlights, and I welcome you to read the article. It was something that I read. This was around the time that gas prices hit $4 a gallon. Or actually, I think it was a little bit before that. So it was in 95 that was it 96 or 95 that I read it. I'm sorry, not 90. 2005, 2006. He states, most important of all, the profits of an information economy seem to have forgotten basic economics. When something becomes abundant, it also becomes cheap. A world awash in information will be a world in which information per se has very little market value. And in general, when the economy becomes extremely good at doing something, that activity becomes less rather than more important. Then he goes on to say, because for the first time, white-collar, college-educated workers were being fired in large numbers, even while skilled machinists and other blue-collar workers were in high demand. This should have been a clear signal that the days of the ever-rising wage premia for people with higher education were over. But somehow, nobody noticed. One of the reasons why when people tell me that they need to go back to school to make more money, I'm very skeptical. Do you need to make more money, or do you just need to look at the economic situation? Like, for instance, with some entrepreneurs, it's just charge more. You don't need more of a degree, right? Like, educated individuals are not necessarily needed. So in some cases, it's just charge more, right? If you're a business owner or you're an entrepreneur. In some cases, it may be finding a way to educate yourself without going to school. If other people are learning the same thing that you're learning, then it's no longer rare, as Krugman points out here. Right? It's abundant. And now you're just competing against clones of yourself, right? Some of the comments on his blog post. The white-collar people used to complain when they found out how much I made, and my answer was, well, when the lights go out, the vacuum pumps and the test chambers go out, the plant environmental control stop working, who do you call? An electrician, right? You don't call the white-collar people. What about this one? Never mind this comment here from, I don't know how to say, Tau Praxis. Never mind that the wealthiest man in my entire extended family by far was a builder. Very smart guy, too. Street smart, no education. There's more ways to be educated than going to school, right? It's called learning from doing. So some of the successful thought process, I say for every generation, there will never be a generation that this changes. Number one, what will always be required? What will have little competition? So what will be required, but what will few do? Right? Underwater welding is a good example of this. The reason why underwater welding pays so much is because it's very difficult to do. Very few people want to do it, but yet it's needed. You got to have an underwater welder. Got to have that position in the world. Also, what will offer growth and sustainability? You know, like from a perspective of a builder or an electrician, if a population is growing, or if a population is moving around, for instance, if you're going to have a population migrate from the suburbs to the city, you're going to need electricians and builders to rebuild things, to redo things, plumbers especially. Like, you just don't have a world that's not going to need plumbers, right? The only problem with plumbers is if there were too many of them. Then it would go back to education would be more valued. And then finally here, rare education is what has value. What is rare education? It's not what everybody else is doing. Right? Again, if you go to school and you learn the same thing that everybody else learns, the housing bubble, by the way, is a great example of this. Everybody thought real estate would always go up in value because that's what they were taught in school. Very few people stopped and thought, wait a minute, something is very unsustainable here. And sure enough, the price of real estate collapsed. So you've got to learn how to teach yourself. Because if I learn the same thing that everybody else is learning, then it stops having so much value. It's what's rare. When it comes to actually looking at an income, I should say. Yes, when it comes to like learning history, the hope is we all learn history the same. So these are some things to think about. I'm going to link the article in the description. It was a recent blog post by Paul Krugman. I'll try to remember to link the blog post as well. But it's something very interesting to see. The pattern of white-collar jobs is beginning to decline as far as wages. And it's a very uncomfortable conversation. I love Krugman's being very honest here. People can, get mad at me for quoting him. This is one of those chew the meat, spit out the bones. There are things I agree and disagree. But one of the things here that I think is that nobody wants to have the discussion that we don't really need more educated people. That education is not what we need anymore. And nobody wants to discuss that. People want to keep pretending like education is the answer. Education is the answer. It's like, no, this is not the answer. And I agree with Krugman. It's a conversation that conservatives, liberals, nobody wants to have this conversation. But yet that's what the economics are showing, is this is what's in demand and this is what we need more of.